Okay, we've been on our phones all day. It's been a lot of talk of technology. And I am actually going to get you to use your phones for a force of good today. How many of us, as teachers, we have our students using their phones as a source of evil in the classroom, perhaps? So please scan on here, and this will allow you to vote and interact with this presentation. This is an example of live action research as we go. Okay, have we all got it on? You can log into it. Good. A little bit about me, I wear several hats. So one, I'm an academic researcher. I conduct a lot of research around cultures of school leadership and how schools develop. And I'm very interested in different approaches that we might call hybridized in the way we can engage in developing and running schools. And so I work a lot with the IB organization, getting out and supporting schools and doing some evaluation in a wide range of things. In my day job, I'm the principal of a pretty well-known school in Malaysia. And one of the things that I really aim to do is, beyond being a principal and a head of the school, I'm a parent before that. This is my little nerdy kid here. This is Quito. And when I lead schools, I want to think about creating environments that my children are going to be happy and healthy and engaged with. And so I try to build the schools that I build for kids like this and for kids like yours. Quito's the kind of kid that doesn't like school. He's the sort that learns things quickly, that doesn't really respect because he's supposed to. He wants to do things his way. And he can challenge teachers. He can push them to be a bit different than they are. I like to think of kids that maybe school doesn't always work for them. Sort of building off your presentation, that sense of mental well-being, that sense of development and care for individuals is more important than most of the other things we do. Now, here's where we're going to get into this experiment bit, and I'm going to ask you to vote. We've got 11 of you on there. If some of you haven't registered yet, you could give it a try. But I want you to think about yourself as a student, and I want you to put yourself back into that space where you were learning as a student. And I'd like to give you a second to vote here on this slide. So if you're on the Metimeter, it's going to let you put in if you really enjoyed school or you didn't. Let's just see. We'll give a few more minutes for people to put that up. Good. This would be the third time that I've collected data on this particular topic. And one of the challenges that we face in leading schools is the vast majority of us, we were actually good at school. It fit for us. That's a pretty natural assumption, right? We enjoyed the environment, therefore we thought we're going to get into education. But the problem is that for a lot of schools and a lot of students, the experience is far from positive. Right? A natural sense of competition, an ability to exclude people, to rank, to make people comply and be part of a system that doesn't fit for them. There are a lot of structures that can be problematic. And one of the things is that, well, you may have very much enjoyed school and felt very safe and supported. You may have students within your context that do not. Now think about this. If you were to go into your school and you were to ask some of your worst students, some of the ones that maybe make you frustrated and angry, if you were to ask them, do you have even one person in this school, one adult, that you reasonably trust and care about and connect with? How tragic would it be if the answer for a significant number of our students was, no, I don't. I'm isolated here. I don't have anybody I can rely on. The other thing that we face as leaders, because our job is so task-driven, we're so orientated around accomplishing things that often we're so stressed out, we don't even have the time to think about what we're doing. When you think about your experience as a leader in schools, in the same way that you want a classroom that's in the zone of proximal development, where the challenge is just right, where we're extending students to grow beyond it. In the same way, as a school leader, you want to be in the place where you're not bored out of your mind, but you're not burned out. And so thinking about, for your life, being in the space where you're able to develop is a very important part of your leadership development. But guess what? As a leader within a school, this is the work that you need to undertake. How you support a team to not be crushed by the burden of the job, but also seeing when people have excess capacity and supporting them to grow. This is a really important bit. And we look at our ratio here. It looks like most of us are in a comfortable zone, but how many of you within your working world do experience moments in time when you really are crushed? So thinking about this, how as a leader, when you're engaging with people, when you're balancing out the million things, how do you set priorities? How do you engage in a process of managing your own stress to then support your faculty and then support your students? Because I'll tell you right now, if you're involved in a process where you look a bit like this guy in your school, because you have parents, because you have budget, because you need to do all these things, you're not going to be an effective leader for that school community. When we think about a wide variety of leadership styles, the process that we go through, our ability to connect with others, to collaborate, to delegate, and empower those around us is going to have a direct relationship to how we deal with stress. So when we feel the need to carry all of the burden in our organizations, that need to be the superhero up front, we're by default going to create a situation where, one, we can't live up to it, but then our entire staff feels the need to do the same. So learning how to say no, learning how to step back, learning how to support others to develop is a way that we can lead happier, healthier lives for ourselves, but also others. In this one, I want to think about your own techniques for salvaging stress. In what seems like a past life, in my 20s, I spent a lot of time engaged in yoga and living in monasteries and meditating. I developed a lot of tools for dealing with stress. And now, when I work to lead schools, I really want to think about techniques that can help empower people to develop their own sense of relaxation and self. And the second one there, which revolves around having somebody professionally that you can access when you're not feeling at your best, is a very important aspect of the school. For many of us, we've done a lot of work around engaging and developing student support networks within our school. And one of the lessons that I picked from COVID is we need to do the same for our faculty and our staff. Consider this context. At my school, 80% of individuals do not come from Malaysia. They're overseas staff. And unfortunately, a lot of adults have this crazy idea that if somehow they move overseas, all their problems are going to be solved. Well, guess what? If you're depressed in Canada, you move to Malaysia, probably you're still going to be depressed. And so us as leaders, we, for better or for worse, inherit a lot of adults with some severe mental health issues. In being able to support these people to survive the rigors of the job, unfortunately, has become our reality nowadays. When we look at this work-life balance, to be honest, you guys are some chilled-out school leaders. This is the first time that I've seen the scale in the middle. For most of us, we tend to take on so much that there's never even a moment to breathe. Take a minute on this one. And one of the things that I'd like you to think about is when we're leading a school and we're dealing with others, we need to model a healthy balance in the way we work. As leaders, we often feel that there's a need to take on everything and engage the entire world. One of the things when we look at modern leadership styles, in the act of distributed leadership, It could be our job to engage with those around us, to develop their capacity to lead, to increase their scope, to take on more aspects of school operation. If any of you here are heads of schools or large organizations, you know that the burden of managing beyond 100 people goes well beyond an individual. And so thinking about how you manage these things and model it for people becomes very effective. Some of these others really relate to organizational change and the directions that we move in. So as a leader, if you're able to model a healthy life balance, but you're also able to project information to people that's timely and on point, you're going to end up creating an environment that's a lot more purposeful, but also less stressful for individuals. So clarity of direction, communication, and including people earlier on in the process is going to help make everything more manageable. It's interesting data. I enjoy coming to work. For many of you as leaders, you may not think that it's your responsibility to create an environment that people are happy to come into work. But I'll tell you what, as an individual that recruits lots of people overseas, it's much better to retain people financially and in terms of the quality of the schools that we build. Retention is a huge strategy around school improvement. If it's a revolving door, one, we're spending money that we don't need to, and two, we're not able to grow and progress in ways. So if you're not worried about creating a happy, positive environment for your staff, selfishly, I'm going to inform you that this is going to make your job easier. It's going to make your school better, and hopefully that's going to make your life better. Perhaps you'll even get more money yourself in doing it. When we think about leadership, there are three approaches that will truly support you in this process of engaging with your staff. So one is distributed leadership, which I've mentioned, and this is the act of delegation, essentially. It's creating roles that have the authority and the responsibility and trust to carry out vital aspects of the work you do. Now, it's a balance. Distributed leaders don't give away everything. In fact, they need to be responsible for a lot of things, but being able to support the people to do the things that they need to do is an important act of growth in school leadership. The second one is transformational, and this revolves around really being there as a guide and a support to help your staff progress and grow. Transformational leaders are very interested in environment and culture. They're very interested in setting up contexts where people feel safe, secure, and willing to take risks in order to reach the next levels in their development. A transformational leader equally needs to be willing to take a risk and needs to be willing to be wrong sometimes. That's an important part of development. A situational leader is also one that's able to respond to situations as they come up and don't just go by the policy. A situational leader is one who hears, oh, your mother's suffering from cancer and you need to go back home for 2 weeks. Well, the policy says we're not going to pay you, but the situational leader considers this and considers, well, what would 2 weeks investment in wage be for this person if I let them go home and I supported him in this? What would the loyalty be worth? A situational leader considers the buildings, the environments they're in, and they adapt to context. Culture is very important. Well, we heard Michael Taylor speak about the context and culture of Japan. We've heard about the culture and context of Fairview International School. Each school needs to work from a situational perspective to develop their own context. There have been several metadata analysis studies around the actions of school leaders. Vivian Robinson conducted a metadata analysis of some 3,000 to 4,000 data points, and she asked these questions. What would be some of the most effective things that leaders could do in terms of developing and driving academic performance or achievement within a school? John Hattie also looked at effective techniques in terms of developing teaching strategies. There's several theories around it. But for you, consider if you were to rank these in your own development, what would be the things that you'd place as important? And here's the really interesting idea that one, if you were to do this and you were to ask your staff, how would you prioritize these things? We only have $100, say, and I can't spend them all on any one thing. But imagine that then we could collectively decide which things were the most important. This doesn't mean that you need staff to make all the budgetary decisions, but it gives them the option of prioritizing things to help you understand where collectively they may be. And if instead we were to allocate more things to professional development or support or collaboration, we might end up with a better environment that supports people's development. The last thing that I'd like to talk to you about is that lasting impact of leaders. I want all of you to think back on your experiences of the people that you have worked for. And if I were to ask you stories, I am sure that each one of you could tell me horror stories about the worst boss that you've ever encountered. Each of us have those wounds of being in the working world. And generally, and I'll say it, it probably was a very conceited, self-absorbed male that you worked for, because that's the way it tends to go. But times that you felt invalidated, where you weren't listened to, where you weren't included, where you were scolded or belittled and treated like a child, we all bear the burdens of those interactions. One thing that I encourage you to do is to think about that experience and not let it go. Remembering where you were, remembering how it felt to be in that terrible context. And don't be that leader. Give people the opportunity to show them that they're cared for. Give people the opportunity to show that their opinion is valued, that their contribution moves beyond a job description or a standard operating procedure. Consider multiple perspectives within a decision-making process and aim to create an environment that's participatory and shared. If you do that, you'll replicate some of the cultures found in the best organizations in the world. And by doing so, one, you'll draw creative people that want to build and have a growth mindset to you. And not only will you draw them to you, you'll keep them with you. Until, unfortunately, as a leader that takes this track, they outgrow your organization and it's time to support them to move on. The last thing, and I'm a bit out of time and I want you to get break, is you can input any questions up there, and that would help me consider sort of how to move forward. I really do encourage you to continue a journey of leadership where you work to grow, you work to support the people around you, and you have a good time doing it. Thank you very much for listening, and I know it's the end of the day, so have a nice break.